Okay, here's the gist. I'm a gay guy who's been living in New York City for the past 3 decades. I got shit to talk about. I also have awesome friends who also have a lot of shit to talk about. That's what this podcast is about. Way off the record. People that you never hear from, that you need to hear from. Because trust me, girl, you need this fabulous in your life. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Today, our guest is Allison Gill, aka AG, the creator of Mueller, She Wrote and The Daily Beans. Allison is a former high ranking government employee, a PhD in health administration, a writer, and a stand up comic. She's also a Webby-award winner that continues to have a powerful voice in today's media. Let's get started. All right, here we go.
All right.
Welcome, Allison Gill. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? I haven't actually seen your face since I think Brooklyn.
Since Bell House in Brooklyn. Yeah, let's tell everybody how we met. So I started following Mueller She Wrote pretty early on, and I don't even know how I heard about it. But I was instantly drawn to it, and women's media, for mass consumption and what you guys talked about, and very quickly became a devotee. And then when you guys were coming around, like doing the tour, and you did a gig at the Bell House in Brooklyn, which is an amazing venue, by the way. And I have to say, I didn't realize there was going to be an open bar. So I was like pounding down bourbons. And by the time, so when I actually met you, the show ended, and Andrea Chalupa and I were sitting on the stage. I just went up to her because I'm a big fan of Gaslit Nation as well. So we were talking, but then afterwards, everyone gathered in the lobby of the place, which is this beautiful building. And that's when I got to talk to Jordan and Jaleesa and you, and it was just fantastic. And yeah, so that's the last time that we've seen each other face to face, sort of, even though it's on Zoom. What was
Yeah.
that? What was it like touring? It must have been kind of really powerful, I imagine.
Yeah, it did have a pretty big impact on us. And I think Brooklyn was one of our first shows. I think we
Mm,
started up in the Northeast with DC and Philly and then hit Brooklyn shortly thereafter. And it was kind of came as a surprise. I mean, the Bell House is one of the premier venues
hmm
in the country, and I absolutely love that venue. And it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And we, we were just doing a podcast out of our kitchen, out of my kitchen,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's hard to gauge. I mean, other than like download numbers, it's hard
hmm
to get the palpable feeling of an audience until you're actually standing in front of one,
Right.
because otherwise it's just the three of us talking into microphones in my kitchen, like on a weekend, like, haha,
Right. Right.
here we are just
So,
talking to each other. And so when we went on tour, I think we did like 13 or 14 cities that year.
mhm.
And then we had to stop because of COVID. But
Mm.
it's it was really cathartic to actually be in front of people, and to see
Yeah.
how many people were listening, and it sort of takes you by surprise, like, all these folks. And I remember saying on stage a few times during that tour, like, is this what y'all are like when I'm in my kitchen? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it
And that
was
they
just,
got everything, they got all of the references that you guys had made previous, on whatever episode and stuff, and they were like locked in like immediately. That must feel like a rock star.
it did. And I was a comedian for 9 years leading up to that, doing
hmm
smaller venues than that. And it would have been like my dream to tour, and hit the venues that we hit as a comedian. Life doesn't always work out the way you plan it, but
Right, right.
it was amazing.
So that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was, well, two things actually, to get a little bit more into the details about how it started and, doing it in your kitchen and meeting Jaleesa and Jordan, having this idea, you had this idea. So that's one thing. And the second prong is how did being a stand-up, or are you still doing stand-up, I should ask?
Well, not because of COVID, no.
Oh, okay, okay. How did that inform your taking on something like creating this podcast. I mean, even though it was like, you know, on the radio, so to speak, podcast, but then doing the live shows, and that must have informed how you took on that challenge. Because I imagine, again, doing the live shows is very different than doing it in your in your kitchen.
Yeah, and it made sense. To go into how it started, I was working for the federal government, Department of Veterans Affairs, pretty high up. I was GS-14, which, to give you an idea, if you remember Lisa Page, right,
Oh yeah,
of the Page and Peter Strzok text fame.
yeah, yeah.
She was a GS-14
Oh,
in federal government, and that's what my position was as well.
mhm.
And it was about 4 months or so after, 3 or 4 months after Mueller had been appointed as special counsel.
Mhm.
And MSNBC was airing an old documentary from 2012, I think, 2013, called
Right,
All the President's Men Revisited.
right, right,
And it was all the MSNBC talking heads, Brian Williams, Lawrence O'Donnell, Rachel Maddow was a large part of that, talking about the Watergate scandal. And I think that they were re-airing it after all this time because of the parallels
right.
between, oh, we have a special counsel, we're investigating this, we're investigating that. And there were just a lot of parallels between Watergate and what we now call stupid Watergate.
Right, exactly. Stupid Nixon.
Yep, which is what early on it was a laughable thing, you know. It only
Yeah.
it wasn't until I think this week that a lot of people really understood the gravity of what we had gotten ourselves into. I mean, obviously Andrea Chalupa knew, you know, she has been
Jesus.
screaming
Her
this.
and Sarah Kendzior have been right on every single point, and they were called, just like you, I think to a degree, extremists and, you know, hysterical, which I fucking hate that word because it's so misogynistic. Yeah, you've been right all along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
They were
that's
a little
amazing.
more on the nose than we were, you know, because I, for example, took Chuck Rosenberg at his word when he said Barr isn't the worst decision for
Right, right.
a lot of us did, and because, you know, I have no specific remembrance or acknowledgement or professional expertise to form an opinion about Bill Barr, other than a couple of items that were in the news. But Chuck Rosenberg did, and I was like, okay, maybe. And I remember, you know, texting with Andrea and Sarah. They're like, no, he's terrible. He's the worst.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, well, let's see what happens. And then I remember, I think it was at Brooklyn. You know, when I had Andrea Chalupa there with us
Mhm.
as a panelist, being like, you were right. You called it out. You told me that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
my forgiveness of Bill Barr was off the mark.
yeah. Iran Contra and that whole thing, and oh Jesus.
So I'm watching this documentary about Watergate from MSNBC, and I'm thinking to myself, God, you know, I bet in 30 years, 20, 30 years, they're going to be doing documentaries on the Mueller investigation and the Trump era. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted
Yeah,
to, the historic significance of it
right.
was sinking in, and I wanted to be a part of that somehow. And I was like, well, I'm not a journalist, and I don't have a degree from Columbia, and I'm not a Rhodes Scholar. How can I do this? And as a comedian, the first thing that pops into your head is, I just start a podcast, because all comedians start podcasts, right?
Right, right,
So I said, well, I want it to be, I want to do, there is no podcast in this space about the Mueller investigation.
right, right.
I want to start it, and I want it to be from a woman's perspective, and I want there to be diverse voices on the panel. And I because you know, I'm privileged 9 ways to Sunday, and I'm also older. I'm on the older side of, well, I'm like smack dab in the middle of Gen X, right?
That's kind of like what like when I first started listening to you guys, I would get all of your references that maybe Jordan or Jaleesa didn't. I'm like, yes, I feel heard. Anyway.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
So it was important for me to do that, but it was also very important for me to do it from a woman's perspective, because I think women have a different concept of justice.
Yeah.
It there's a bit of compassion in it rather than vigilante type images.
Mhm.
Justice herself is a woman,
Right.
identifies as a woman. So it was very important to me to do that. And so I said, okay. And then that week, the first indictments dropped
Mm.
on Manafort and Gates. And I said, well, this is it. We have to. So within a day, I set up a little studio in my kitchen because
Mhm.
I'm formerly a musician and a comedian. So I have some sound equipment, bought some other sound equipment.
I want to talk to you about your music later, but yeah.
And set it up, and we recorded our first episode. I remember I had index cards, like notes on them,
Yeah.
you know, and was just reading what had happened. It was a weekly podcast, and I'd be like,
Mhm.
here's what happened Monday, here's what happened Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then we had these segments where we would say, these are just the facts that are being reported. And
Dun,
then
dun.
and then we would go into speculation and theory and more curatorial type journalism.
Mhm.
And we are definitely coming at it from the left.
Yeah.
But I wanted there to be specific. I wanted to separate out what was being reported in the media, cite my sources for the reporting in the media, be it just
Mhm.
facts based, and then separate out my speculation, which comes from my own perspective,
Beans.
biases and things like that. And so we just started. And I remember the first show we released, and we were looking at our downloads that first week, and we had 80 downloads. And we were all so overjoyed with that and thinking, oh my gosh, because most comedians start a podcast, you get like 10, 12 listeners,
Right.
handful of listeners, couple dozen listeners, and we're like, we got 80.
Now, at this point, let me ask, did you have, because I use Captivate for this podcast, you have to park them somewhere and they do analytics and stuff.
Mhm.
Did you find like you must have found a similar service to like put your episodes out, right?
Yeah, we started with Podbean,
Right. Okay.
and then within 6 months, we went from those 80 downloads to 150,000 per episode. And the Podbean bandwidth couldn't handle it, so we had to switch over to Libsyn.
Okay.
And then we were there for a while until a network picked us up.
Okay.
Starburns Audio picked us up,
Right.
and I think they use Megaphone.
And they're mostly women-based, I believe. The
Starburns?
no?
No, they're like the Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon, Sklar
Oh, okay.
Brothers.
Nice.
It's hard to find women-based podcast networks. The entire podcasting industry sort of has like 6 dudes that run it,
Right. Right.
And we were trying to find a network that way or start our own network. And then I think the all-women network came out called Arios. And
Oh, okay.
we were in talks with them, but then I think we were bought by a different group. But it all sort of blew up so fast, and then it wasn't in my hands anymore.
Right.
But
Right.
we tried to maintain, and I think we did a very successful job at maintaining our diversity in the staff that I had, being women run, and
Right.
so on and so forth. But that's how it started. And then, I think, what was the second part of your question? Like,
God.
how it started, how it's going?
I guess, well, having heard what you said, I'm going to pivot a little bit, and that must have been so overwhelming, like to go from 80 to 150,000 downloads, like within the span of what, 6 months, 9 months?
Well, you learn really quickly your responsibility.
Right. Right.
And I was learning, and we were getting a bunch of feedback, and I always wanted to incorporate the feedback into what I was doing. And so a lot of language change. There was a lot of lessons about about that going forward. And I recall it always being a constant work in progress.
Right.
And then we started doing these bonus episodes, for midweek episodes.
Mhm.
or because there's like we had a paid subscribership where you could like pay $1 a month and you would get ad free. You wouldn't
Right.
have to listen to the ads.
Right.
And then that, as the Mueller investigation wound down and we started doing that midweek episode, turned into a daily episode, and that's how the Daily Beans came.
Tell our viewers that haven't heard or seen the show what beans, how that whole etymology came about.
Sure. I was looking for early on when we started blowing up, I was looking for a catchphrase, not like get her done or something, but because Maddo, who is a hero of mine, would always
me
say,
too.
watch this space, and
Right.
someone else had put a pin in it, and I was like,
Right.
I need something like that, because we're going to be revisiting a lot of these stories. And I tested out a few different things, and I felt like Saru on Discovery trying to test out the, engage, let's fly, or whatever.
Right.
And nothing was hitting, and I went to the hive mind. I went to social media, like, what do you suggest? And nothing was really grabbing me. And then I remembered a friend of mine, Dallas McCall.
I was gonna say your friend, yeah.
Who's a comedian, and way back in the day, he had an old bit that he would do about, it was around the time the Blue Collar Comedy Tour was blowing up, right? And one of his bits as a comedian was, all I need is a catchphrase and then I'll be famous. He would try out these catchphrases, and they were like just ridiculous. Like one of them was, is that medium salsa? And things like that. And one of them was, put some beans on it.
Oh.
And I called him up and I said, hey, do you still do the catchphrase bit? Do you still do the put the beans on it thing? And he's like, nah. And I was like, can I have that? I was like, and he's like, yeah, sure, okay. Like it didn't make any sense.
Right.
The joke was that it was stupid. He's like, why do you want? And I was like, it feels right. And he's like, all right. So that was because of the speculation that we do and the predictions that we, make. That was it. It was like, it's like betting. Like I bet beans on it. And then shortly after that, we, when we were nominated for the Webby, Webby Awards infamously allow your acceptance speech to have 5 words.
Whoa.
And I was like, well, perfect.
Some beans. No way. Was that your acceptance speech? Yeah. That's awesome.
And everyone was like, okay. And
oh my God, I love it.
Because we went right after like who's Charlie Sheen? Martin Sheen. We went like right after Martin Sheen or something. Or Kirk Douglas. Somebody a little bigger than us had to give their 5-word speech, and we get up, we just go, put some beans on it. And everyone was like, okay.
Oh no. Right. Oh, that's hilarious. But you won in your category, yeah?
We did. We beat Slate's Trumpcast. We beat Washington Post. We beat The Daily, New York Times, and we beat Rachel Maddow's Bagman.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's amazing.
Blew my mind. I was like, what?
All right. I want to pivot a little bit. Because I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was your work at the Veterans Administration, Veterans Affairs, and the whole impact of the investigation into your podcast. Because I know that you're very clear about, in the early days even of Mueller, she wrote of saying that you worked for the federal government, and so you can't give your full name because your name at the time was AG, your initials. Walk me through that whole nightmare.
Well, so we started the podcast in late 2017, and when 2018 rolled around, we started getting all the downloads, and I was like, uh-oh. Because in early 2017, we had gotten a memo from the White House. All of us, all of the federal employees had gotten a memo from the White House saying, hey, the Hatch Act is a
Right.
thing, and we're modifying the Hatch Act. I'm doing an executive order to modify the Hatch Act. And what the Hatch Act used to say was you can't promote or fundraise for anyone running for public office, or you
Right.
can't oppose or support anyone running for public office. And they modified it to say you can't oppose Trump specifically and by name. And that also they put a bunch of social media restrictions in. You can't tweet badly about this president. You can't post anything, obviously during your work hours, you're not supposed to do that anyway. But even afterwards, you can't retweet or like any fundraising tweets, and you can't say anything bad about Trump. Not anyone who's running for office, because he was at the time. He filed to run again the day he was inaugurated.
Right. Right.
But him specifically by name, he was very adamant about that. I was like,
Did it
uh-oh.
say everybody except Kellyanne Conway?
Yeah,
At the end of it, like,
right.
Jesus Christ.
And so when it started to get big, I started to get worried, like, because I know I'm allowed to have a podcast, and I, like you said, I didn't use my name, but I just wanted to make sure that nothing I was doing, because at the time when we were getting bigger, the Twitter account for the podcast was in the hands of other people. And so I hired a lawyer to advise me on a professional, specifically an expert at in the Hatch Act and federal government employees, who advised me to what to do, what not to do. I sent an email out to my staff saying, don't tweet during these hours from our account, blah, blah, blah. And I made sure to be very careful about that. And then in 2019, in early 2019, and this was the height of the podcast. This is when we were getting, a couple million downloads a month. And right around then, and right around my talking about same time Bill Barr improperly redacted the Mueller report and botched the release and lied and mischaracterized the findings. And I was very adamant. I was talking about that quite a bit. Right around that time, I got a message from my supervisor that my job was moving across the country.
Right.
And I could either move or I would be fired. Now, they already knew I wouldn't move across the country, because months earlier, at the end of 2018, my supervisor was retiring, and my supervisor contacted me. He works in DC. I work in San Diego. There's two of me in the country doing what I do, and they are what I do is I'm the liaison to the Department of Defense for TRICARE. And there are two TRICARE offices in the country. One's in San Diego, one's in DC. And so
so what is TRICARE?
TRICARE is the healthcare benefit for retired service members and their families, and then service members who don't live near a military base.
Okay.
And since the VA is a network provider for TRICARE, I was in charge of coordinating all that billing, making sure that the bills were paid from the DoD to the Department of Veterans Affairs and stuff like that. And then working on interagency health affairs, which was to work with the Department of Defense to be a steward of the taxpayer dollar, so we weren't shelling out a bunch of money sending veterans and active duty service members and their families to private doctors, which cost 3 times as much, and the care is substandard. We were working together to see if we could do that healthcare at a fraction of the cost to the taxpayers with better quality care. That was my job. And there are 2 TRICARE offices in the country, one in San Diego and one in DC. And I'm the West Region liaison, and I have an East Region liaison. And so when they came to me and said, yeah, we're moving your job as the West Region TRICARE liaison to DC. And when my supervisor retired, they actually asked me, he had sent me an email and said, would you be interested in my job?
Right. That's what I would think.
The director here in DC. And I said, I can't move. My mother is aging and she's out here on the West Coast. And so they knew I wouldn't move. And so when they said, it was April 3rd, April 3rd, 2019, they said, you move or you're fired. And I immediately took 12 weeks off because that was very, that was hard. That felt like a betrayal to me.
Right.
I am a veteran with PTSD, and I've been betrayed by government agencies a few times in the past. And so it was very triggering.
Right.
And the 12 weeks I took off were 12 weeks I earned in leave. I had over 240 hours of leave saved up. And I took that leave. And when I returned, I was supposed to report to DC on August 6th. But I had already signed a letter saying I wasn't going to move, so fire me, but they hadn't fired me yet.
Mm.
And on August 6th, when I came back, my new supervisor set up, the one who took the job that I was offered, set up a call with me. And I thought it was going to be a welcome back. Here's what you missed. Let me get you up to speed call. But the call opened up with, this is a fact-finding investigation. And I'm going to ask you questions. You have to answer them. And I asked to have my lawyer present.
Right.
And they said, no, you don't get a lawyer on this call. And at that point, they started.
Is that legal?
No, no.
Jesus Christ.
And at that point, they started interrogating me about my podcast and about the podcast. And I asked again for a lawyer, and they said, no, you don't get one. And it was also that day that the Washington Post reported that Mick Mulvaney, who was at the time the chief of staff of the White House, had given a speech and made remarks to a group of donors saying, hey, we found a trick to get rid of government employees we don't like, because it's really hard to fire a government employee. But we figured out if you move their job across country, they'll quit or we can fire them.
So I wanted to ask you, that's exactly what I wanted to ask you is like, was this a Trump specific sort of policy, or had this existed before, like making people move or firing them?
It's pretty new. I mean, it was a loophole that they found at the OPM, the Office of Personnel Management.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so I asked for telework because I wasn't in DC, so I couldn't report to DC.
Mm-hmm.
And they denied my telework, saying that it was imperative that I be face-to-face in the office in San Diego. That's part of my job, and it's imperative to your job that you're in San Diego. And I'm like, well, then why did you move my job to DC if it's imperative that I be in the office in San Diego? And so my lawyer, I stepped back and let my lawyers respond to all that.
Right.
And I'm still going through litigation for that. That was
really?
August of 2019. But I was ultimately removed from my position finally in March of 2020. And I've been trying to get my severance and, you know, my retirement TSP.
Oh, all that's locked up. Oh, damn.
And they're fighting that. So that is, and what's interesting is they didn't remove me for cause. My lawyers who advised me on the Hatch Act did a very good job. They couldn't find that I had broken any rules or any policy, which is hard to do when you work for the government. It's hard to
right.
Some rule because there's 9
Especially
million.
now. Yeah.
So they actually removed me. They decided that because of my PTSD, I was medically unfit to serve.
What?
Yeah. So they removed me for being medically unfit this past March.
Oh my God. Wow. I'm hugging you right now. That's fucked up. That's so, Jesus.
Can I tell you something though?
Please.
It freed me up to be able to fundraise for Kamala and Biden. Oh,
nice. Good.
And then again for Ossoff and Warnock.
Thank God for Ossoff and Warnock.
And we won. We won them both. Mm-hmm. And I maintained my integrity. I did everything right. I was removed wrongfully. Right. And to me, and that was my career. I was there for over 11 years. And I went to school to get my doctorate in health administration because that was going to be my career. Mm-hmm. And, you know, coping with the sadness of losing that career, helping veterans and helping active duty service members and their families get access to healthcare. Mm-hmm. Was hard, but looking back on it now, where we sit now, mm-hmm. it was worth it. I feel like I did the right thing.
I think so too, and you know, fingers crossed. You know, a new administration comes up, and maybe it can be looked at. Hopefully, it's still being looked at, so it should be a matter of like, okay, let's prioritize the kinds of things that we need to take care of right now.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
definitely rather have the Biden administration, Department of Veterans Affairs deciding my case
yeah.
than the Trump administration.
So I want to talk briefly about what happened on Wednesday. I want mostly to keep this podcast about you and how everything that's happened, how, who you are, where you came from. Um, Mueller, she wrote how that all came about. We've talked about that, but I also feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about what happened on Wednesday.
Well, talking about talking about what happened on Wednesday is talking about me.
Right, right, right.
Talking about all of us, because as a veteran and as a patriot and
An actual patriot.
somebody who loves our country and the Capitol, and I've been several times. I worked at DC, and it was really hard to watch what happened. And then and as more stories are coming out about what the Department of Defense and the Pentagon did not do,
Right, right.
and how that was possibly coordinated with the White House, is
And how it was set in place months ago. That's what really freaks me out, like this was totally coordinated. It was planned. And there's this new video. Did you see that? I don't know if you've seen this new video that was released today, that I saw it on Twitter, and it was like all of these fucking insurrectionists like filing into this huge hallway, and the cops along the periphery just standing there as they all, with their Confederate flags and Camp Auschwitz shirts and whatever, and paramilitary gear, all just walking straight fucking into the Capitol. Like, as you say, there's a lot coming out now, and one of the things that freaks me out also is it seems to have been, luckily they're too stupid, to plan anything in this administration. But the general idea, seems to me, was to knock out the top three in succession to the president, right? VP, Pelosi, Grassley. Like that was the actual plan, but it wasn't articulated properly, I guess. So they just like, President Trump told us to go to Washington and then to storm the Capitol. And then there was like, now what do we do?
Well, it seems like there were two kinds of insurrectionists. There were the, hey, we're just here because Trump. And then there were
Right.
former military, paramilitary, tactical gear guys who, and I'm really interested to see if this has anything to do with Eric Prince, or if
Exactly.
the
Blackwater
recent pardoning of the 4 Blackwater murderers.
Right.
But and I have to say too, the only thing I think that hurt me more than watching that happen and watching some of the police take selfies with these folks, these terrorists, I think the only thing that hurt me more this year, or I should say in 2020, than that was the treatment of peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters.
Exactly.
Not especially at Lafayette Square, where that had a lot of coverage, but across the country.
Right.
And we're learning now that a lot of people from the Seattle Police Department were there storming the Capitol. And everyone's like, how would they just let him in? How could this happen? Well, it was coordinated. And
I feel like my head is going to explode if one more journalist says, how are they not prepared? It's like, dude, I'm some dude in New York City and I read the news and it's so clearly coordinated. And
well,
then
there are now memos that came out Monday before the attack on the Capitol that show the Pentagon putting restrictions on the amount of number of police, the ammunition they could have, air support they could have, how they were allowed to interact with protesters. They were told you aren't allowed to touch them. And
Jesus, I didn't know that.
and if you want any changes in this, Mayor Bowser, you have to get the express written consent of the acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Mueller, who was just recently installed at the Pentagon by Trump in the number 1, 3, and 4 spots, actually. And Kash Patel in there too, who was a former Nunes aide, and Nunes just got the Medal of Honor. So it's all very, it seems obvious to me. We don't have that smoking gun, so to speak, yet document that shows that there was coordination between the White House and the Pentagon to ignore, but that it also explains the pushback that that President Biden was talking about, that, you know, we're getting pushback for transition with the Pentagon. It was all orchestrated to allow these seditionists to attack the Capitol without National Guard response. And I do think that the Capitol Police they knew it was happening, but they they weren't prepared to stop it because they were purposefully not given the tools to do so.
Right.
A Capitol Police officer has died as a result, and the video of the officer getting crushed in the door. I don't know if you've seen that one yet. It's very graphic.
I don't think I have.
But there were police officers letting them in too, and in some instances they had to because they were just completely outnumbered before the cavalry arrived, and in other instances it was waving them in. Or I remember one officer not letting a member of the press in, and she's arguing, saying, I'm the press, and she's showing the press badge, and he's like, no, you can't just walk in, you can't just go in. And meanwhile there's files of these seditionists going right through and past them, and he wouldn't let her by. So it's there, and they had plans. They had the plans of the
maps of the underground tunnels and shit,
and the offices that they needed to go to. That was provided by somebody with knowledge of that.
I wanted to ask you, Justice Thomas's wife,
Ginny Thomas,
Ginny Thomas, like, I don't know if it's been confirmed, but there's reporting that she funded something like 70 buses to go into Washington on this day. Like, has that been confirmed? Do we know?
I haven't seen a confirmation of that. The only thing I've seen is the confirmation of her reporting of the support that she had for the event. And this current Department of Justice has said they are not going to they're not going to go forward with investigations into incitement of violence against Trump or Rudy or Trump Jr. But Merrick Garland, when he accepted his nomination this week for Attorney General, said that he would, and there would be a thorough investigation.
Oh, great. Jesus. Imagine where we'd be. I mean, as bad as it is, imagine if Ossoff and Warnock weren't elected.
Or imagine if Trump was. Imagine if Trump was.
Well, All right. I want to bring it lighter. We've had quite a time of it. So talk to me about, so on the Daily Beans, which is, as you said, evolved over the course of several years doing Mueller, She Wrote, into a daily podcast. By the way, how are you able to do that? Like, every day for like an hour, you have this show, Daily Beans, and you have amazing guests. How is Neil Katyal, by the way?
Oh, he's great. He's fantastic.
He's lovely. I love him. Quarantine Confessions. I love this. Can you share one or two of your favorite quarantine confessions with our audience?
Recently, we had somebody write in who is in charge of taking school kids out to help clean up their local creek. And they pick up garbage and plastics and and whatever, cigarette butts, and they clean up, and then the adults
I think I know where this is going. Go
at the
on.
end of it always have the trifecta, or the Holy Trinity, the three weirdest things that they found that day. And one of the young girls, probably 9 or 10, found, is this a rated PG show?
Oh no, hell no.
Oh, okay, all right. Found
No, you can swear and talk about anything you want here.
found a giant double-ended dildo. And she's waving it around.
Wait, in a creek?
Yeah, Creekside, yeah.
How does that happen?
That's an interesting prequel that we don't. She's waving it around saying, I found a vibrator. I found a vibrator. And all these kids are laughing. And the guy like runs up and he grabs it. And she's like, I found a vibrator. And he immediately said, it's not a vibrator, it's a dildo. And then realizing he just taught these 9-year-olds a new
Oh my God, it's awesome.
And trying to keep them from not talking about it, and just putting, and he like opens up this plastic bag and he's like, here, put it in here, and she just drops it in, it thud, it hits the ground. And he's just like doesn't even know what to do. And as they're walking back to the bus, whatever, that they're all like, we found a dildo, we found like, stop.
So this is like a ceremony that they do at the end of the year or something?
And so they, so that was one of the Holy Trinity of things that they found that day. This person who wrote in this confession was like, I've been struggling with whether or not to tell this story, because my whole job that day was to stop talking about the dildo and get everyone to not talk about it. And so I don't know if I want to amplify it. So we read this story, Dana and I, Dana Goldberg, co-host on the Daily Beans, could not stop laughing. I couldn't even get my sign off out. I couldn't even say my sign off line, or that was the beans at the end. I was laughing so hard. And
That's
I was
awesome.
Like, leave it, because it's so and then we got a bunch of emails because we have, even though our tagline is news with swearing, and we do swear quite a bit. Because I watch Maddo and I'm like, she wants to say fuck right now so badly. And
right.
I want to do that for her. And even though that we have a lot of listeners who listen with their younger kids, like 10, 11, 12, 13. We have a lot of listeners in that age range. And they all wrote in, they're like, thanks AG and Dana. Now I have to explain to my 14-year-old Girl Scout what a difference is between a vibrator and a dildo.
Oh my God.
And that's why we do the good news and confessions at the end of the show, so that if you just want the news, it's all up front.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that one will live in infamy. I think I'm actually going to submit it to the Webbies as an episode, just to.
I think so.
Just to be like, because for the Webbies, you can either have, you can submit to different categories: best podcast, best host, and they have a best episode. And I'm like, and a best segment. I'm like, I'm going to do that. That's
nice. Oh, that's awesome.
That's for our news program.
Let me see. I think I want to talk to you about your music, because I didn't know about this until I started like researching you for this podcast. You have a beautiful voice and you're a singer-songwriter. I want to, in the show notes, put where people can hear this.
Well,
so
there's an album out on Spotify.
Okay.
I released it 15 years ago. It's under
is it Prophet Flower or?
Yep, that's it. Prophet, Prophet. It's definitely not a Profit flower. I don't make any money off that record. But I think Spotify sends
No.
for like $9 every year or something.
All right, I'm gonna put that link in the show notes.
I released that album. I did all the I wrote all of the, there's one cover song on there, but I wrote all the rest of them and did all the vocals and instrumentation. The only thing I didn't do is play the drums. I can't play the drums. Or I've never tried, at least.
Right.
But that, that's doing music is what led me to doing comedy, which is what led me to reading the news. So
You're a Renaissance woman. What can I say?
I don't know about that. But you'd ask me like how it sort of informed my tour with Mueller, She Wrote, and being comfortable being on stage. It just made sense after we were blowing up, and CAA, Creative Artists Agency, contacted us. They're like, "Do you want to go on tour?" And we got a manager.
Awesome.
And I was like, "Yeah." Didn't even hurt me. Like, "Yeah, I want to go on tour." And they're like, "Great, we got you at Triple Door, we got you at the Bell House, we got you Lincoln Hall, we got you at the Miracle Theater, Parkway." And I'm like, these are all theaters that I would have died to play as a comic.
Right.
So we went out on the road. I miss it. I miss touring.
So one of the things I have on here is, what are your thoughts about, when performers specifically are going to be able to, get back on the road, or Broadway, or theaters in general, given the fact that, thank God, again, we have a new administration coming, with hopefully a much better, sounder, vaccine distribution system. I'm hearing like fall of 2021. I don't know.
It really depends. It depends. I am 100% confident in President Biden's vaccine distribution plan.
Yeah.
What I'm not confident in is whether enough people will take the vaccine because of anti-vaxxing sentiments and conspiracy theories, like this pharmacist in Wisconsin who purposefully and intentionally spoiled 500 doses of the vaccine because he thought it alters your DNA, or people think you're going to get chipped, microchipped.
Right.
As they tweet from their tracking device about being tracked. And so in order to get herd immunity, we need 80% of the people to take this vaccine. And I don't think that they're going to. So, but the good news is, I think for us, for performers, for podcasters, for people in the theater and the opera and people in the arts, we're all going to take the vaccine.
Right.
And so, I think once there's a sense that anyone who would go to see a live podcast, and the people who are putting it on and the staff have all been vaccinated.
Right.
It's a little bit of a safer endeavor. The problem is getting to the venue on a plane with, people who might be traveling to the Capitol to storm it.
Right.
Vaccines are funded by the deep state and George Soros, and Bill Gates wants to microchip you and alter your DNA so that, it's
right. And Hugo Chavez is,
of course.
It's just unreal. I was on Twitter last night when Trump got finally kicked off of Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm just scrolling through, and I follow Kirstie Alley because she's a fucking batshit crazy mess, but I love her. And I had a little brief. She came after me after I came after her, some bullshit. And so I still reach out to her every now and then, not DM, but just regular Twitter. And her and Scott Baio and all these fucking
Kevin Sorbo
D-listers are like, I've lost 30,000 followers in the last hour. What's going on? Liberal tears. And so I responded and I said, you have 1.5 million followers right now. So what's going on, dude? And they're all it's kind of hilarious and terrifying at the same time, which kind of sums up
when Josh Hawley lost his book deal and blamed First Amendment rights, like everyone has the constitutional right to get a book deal.
Right.
And somebody joked, oh, Hawley lost his book deal, at least the book would have had a spine. And I thought that was like a really good zinger. But yeah, they're all very sad and very upset now, and the list of things that Trump's been banned from. I know Pornhub came out this morning and said we've banned.
Was
Trump.
that real? I thought there was a joke.
It still, I mean, not like he had an active Pornhub account, thank God, but
Right.
That's
And Stephen Colbert said, I think it was Stephen Colbert said, Trump was banned on Twitter. Okay, next up, Grubhub or something like that.
he lost his Yelp review status or whatever.
Well, listen, thank you for doing this. This has been a dream, honestly. Maybe a part 2 when everything like settles down a little bit. I would love to talk to you again about, where we are, say in March or whatever,
100%.
Thank you for being here, and stay safe. Stay indoors if you can, everybody out there. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you, Allison.
You're welcome. And check it out, because on January
20th,
on January 20th, Andrew Torres of Opening Arguments and myself are starting a new show about Biden's Department of Justice and how
clean up on aisle 45.
Clean up on aisle 45. I'm going to make sure that we hold them accountable, hold this new administration accountable to holding those who in the Trump crimes and
that's genius. Can you put the link on that Google Doc so I can, or is it not out yet?
It's not out yet. It doesn't drop until the 20th. We do have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD.
Okay.
And you can sign up, and we'll get going on Inauguration Day. Our first one drops, and it's going to be all about Merrick Garland and what the expectations are. We're going to set the baseline and go from there, and hopefully see if we can't rebuild the nation's faith in the Department of Justice and the intelligence.
That actually seems like the most important thing at this point. So, all right, one more thing. You said Patreon is aisle 45 pod, or cleanup is mentioned.
Aisle 45 pod, AISLE45POD.
Okay, great. Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
It was good to see you. It was great to see you.
You too. Don't go away.
Okay.
Way Off the Record has been written, produced, and edited by Scott Ambrosino and Christian Hernandez. Our music is by the amazing Marie Tree. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. And reach out to us on social media. We can be reached at the @WOTR pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.